talk on is infection in post-transplant patient. The objective of my talk are to identify major problem in post-transplant patient, to know the timeline of infection, prevention of infection, prophylaxis and immunization mainly, and also I am going to talk on some common infection in this population and graft versus host disease. Over the last 10 years, the number of solid organ transplant and bone marrow transplant has risen exponentially. However, everything comes as cost. Even in this group of patients, they face some major problem. The most important problem they have is life-threatening infection, which occurs in almost 70% of the patients. Another important complication which they have is allograft dysfunction, which require the need of increase in immunosuppression and the complications associated with it. And last but not the least is post-transplant lymphoproliferative disorders. There are some general principles which we must know before we approach the patient. The potential etiology of infection in this group of patients are diverse. They not only suffer from common community acquired bacterial and viral disease, but also they are prone to uncommon opportunistic infections which are unique to this group of patient. Moreover, the sign and symptoms are muted. So by the time they present to the hospital, it's an advanced disease. The infection in these patients must be treated as a medical emergency because it is associated with high morbidity and mortality. Now, the risk of infection depends on organ transplanted, like the risk is more in liver and bone marrow transplant compared to renal transplant. Type of transplant. If it's an allogenic transplant, the risk of infection is more, is relatively less in patients with autologous transplant. Again, we have to know that as they are prone to opportunistic and community acquired infection, we have to understand what is the timing post transplant to know which infection is more probable at that particular time. Also, the risk of infection depends on type of immunosuppression, what is used for induction, what is used for maintenance, and the next is net state of immunosuppression, which is already been told to you. Also, there is a role of pathogen-pathogen interaction, and CMV plays a very important role in this, as CMV does not only cause infection by itself, but it also predisposes host to various other infections. So now, first of all, let's understand what is the time life of infection in solid organ transplant. This phase can be divided into 3 phases. First is 0 to 1 month, second to 6 months, and after 6 months. Though this timeline is arbitrary, but most of the infection follow this group, timeline. Now, in the 0 to 1st month, the effect of exogenous immunosuppression is still not evident, as they are more prone to community or nosocomial bacterial infection, which happens in otherwise immunocompetent patient. The infection can be because of complication of surgery or hospitalization. Usually these infections are bacterial, and the patient can have wound infection, they can have pneumonia, line sepsis, bacteremia, urosepsis or biliary sepsis in patients with liver transplant. About 10% of patients also are prone to get fungal infection or herpes simplex virus infection. Second period, which is from 2nd to 6th month, is the period of maximum immunosuppression, and in this period the risk of opportunistic infection is high. The risk depends on the type of immunosuppression used, antibiotic prophylaxis, and the local epidemiology. These patients are prone to opportunistic infections like cytomegalovirus, aspergillus, and pneumocystis zerovecki. After 6 months, usually the requirement for immunosuppression is much less. So these patients, unless they had a rejection and where the dose of immunosuppression was increased, they usually get community acquired infection. However, if they are still on high dose of immunosuppression, the risk of opportunistic infection remains. A number of infections can be transmitted through the donor organ. They are mainly viral infections, especially cytomegalovirus, hepatitis A, B, C or HIV infection. Fungal infections like histoplasma, coccidioids and cryptococcus also can be transmitted to the donor organ. Protozoal infection like toxoplasma, malaria or trypanosomiasis again can be transmitted to the donor. Some bacterial infection like tuberculosis, nosocomial pneumonia agent and urinary bacteria can be transmitted through the donor organ. And in endemic area, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which mainly is transmitted through corneal transplantation. Again, hematopoietic cell transplantation patients have 3 timelines which determines the risk of infection and the type of organism they suffer from. This timeline can be divided into 3 phases. Phase 1 is a pre-engraftment period, phase 2 is a post-engraftment period and phase 3 is a late phase. The pre-engraftment period lasts from 0 to 30 days, where the main problem is neutropenia. Almost all of these patients suffer from neutropenia and hence the risk of bacterial infection is very high in them. The main infections are gram-negative bacilli, gram-positive organism or gastrointestinal streptococcal infections are seen. A small percentage of them can have herpes simplex, mucositis and infection, and uncommonly they can also have candida infection. In the second phase, which is a phase of post-engraftment, the host has recovered from neutropenia. The main problem here is impaired cellular and humoral immunity, impaired phagocyte function and acute graft versus host disease. As I told you, this phase lasts from 30 to 100 days and this is the phase of maximum immunosuppression. And in this phase, they are prone to again opportunistic infections like cytomegalovirus, aspergillus or Pneumocystis jirovecii. The third phase, which is a late phase, which is usually after 100 days of transplantation, there is recovery of cellular, majority of the cellular and humoral immunity has recovered. And here, if there is no chronic graft versus host disease, the infections which occur are community acquired infections and more due to capsulated organisms. Also, if they are receiving immunosuppression for graft versus host disease, risk of varicella zoster, aspergillus and pneumocystis remain high. Now, we have to understand what is engraftment. I said you have a pre-engraftment and an immediate post-engraftment period. Engraftment is defined as a stage at which the absolute granulocyte count is more than 500 per microliter and sustained. Platelet count is more than 20,000 and sustained. And there is no transfusion requirement for 3 days. This phase is longer in patient undergoing allogenic BMT because they receive higher degree of immunosuppression. Now, a bone marrow transplant patient is told to be immunocompetent if the CD4 count is more than 200 per ml of blood and the immunoglobulin level is normal. If they are immunocompetent, if they satisfy these 2 conditions, there is no increased risk of opportunistic infection unless the patient has chronic graft versus host disease. Now, there are some general principles of diagnosis in this group of patients. Serology testing is usually not helpful. It is only done to identify latent infection and risk stratification for further chemoprophylaxis. Antigen detection and nucleic acid detection based assay are what are advised, however, they should be standardized as per WHO standard. Appropriate cultures must be sent, blood cultures or wherever you are thinking the infection is, those appropriate cultures must be sent early. Also, there should be a low threshold to do a CT scan and MRI of the involved organ in these patients. Tissue biopsies with histopathology is mainly done when you are looking at the cause for rejection. Studies have shown that early infectious disease referral has shown to improve outcome in this group of patients. Now, as I told you, prevention of infection is very, very important in this patient, because once they suffer from infection, there is high morbidity and mortality. So, you should have a strategy pre-transplant, peri-transplant and post-transplant to reduce the infection in this group of patients. Again, hand washing remains the paramount in reducing the risk of infection and should be followed at all the stages. For pre-transplant prevention of infection, you must evaluate the donor and recipient for active and latent infection. A detailed history about occupation, any recent travel, recent infection, old infection or exposure to a patient with active infection must be taken from both donor and the recipient. And also a general examination should be done to find out any focus of infection. Patients should also be evaluated for colonization with a multi-drug resistant pathogen, especially if they had a recent hospitalization. And you should know the flora of that particular place so that you can modify your antibiotic accordingly. Vaccination of recipient and close contact again is very, very important, and it is shown to reduce the risk of infection post-transplant. You can have some checklist, to know whether this patient is going to have a high risk or low risk of transplant related infections. If there is a good HLA match, short OT time, good immediate graft function, no technical problem and good antibiotic prophylaxis, the risk of pre and peri-transplant is going to be low. Also, post-transplant risk is lower if the patient is on appropriate prophylaxis for Pneumocystis jirovecii, CMV and prophylaxis for latent infection like tuberculosis if required. There is a high risk peri-transplant infection if the patient has received induction with immunosuppressive agent, pulse therapy, pulse steroid, plasmapheresis, if there is ABO incompatibility or active infection at the time of transplantation or high requirement for packed batch cell. Also, some technical problems increase the risk of infection in this group of patients, namely if there is an anastomotic leak, if the patient goes back to OT, if the patient is requiring prolonged intubation, if there is a wound side infection or surgical time is long, it increases the risk of peri-transplant and immediate post-transplant infection. The risk of late post-transplant infection is higher if the patient has graft dysfunction, if there is latent infection or graft rejection. So, what is the prophylaxis which we must give in patients with solid organ transplant? Universal prophylaxis with cotrimoxazole for Pneumocystis carinii should always be given in all these SOT transplant unless they are allergic to sulfa drug. It not only protects from pneumocystis but also protects from Listeria monocytogenes and Toxoplasma gondii. Ganciclovir prophylaxis should be given if the patient has undergone intensification of immunosuppression, especially T cell depleting antibody induction therapy has been used. Otherwise, the prophylaxis should be preemptive. I am going to talk about what is preemptive and what is prophylactic therapy for CMV infection. Now, if the patient has got history of herpes simplex or varicella zoster in past, acyclovir therapy should be given for 3 to 6 months and during intensive immunosuppression, because at this time there is a maximum risk of reactivation of these viruses. Fungal prophylaxis should be given only in high risk patient, that too is more been studied in patient with liver transplant, and the choice depends on fungus suspected. Immunization is very important and it must be given before and after transplant to these patients. Also, the close household contact should receive immunization. Now, one thing which we have to remember is this tells us the immunization against which the host must be immunized, but you should never give live or live attenuated viruses immediately after transplant till the patient is on immunosuppression. Also, the household contact or health workers also should be immunized to reduce the infection transmission to the transplant patient. If a patient is traveling to an endemic area, appropriate required vaccination must be given to him. Now let's talk about hematopoietic cell transplant or bone marrow transplant patient. What is the prophylaxis we should use in these patients? Again, we divide them into 3 phases. Now, initial pre-engraftment period, which lasts from 0 to 30 days, the studies have shown that you should give bacterial prophylaxis if the patient is receiving myeloablative conditioning, otherwise it is controversial. Fluoroquinolone and beta-lactam or macrolide is usually recommended, but of course you have to modify it as per your own hospital flora. Fungal prophylaxis is generally recommended in all hematopoietic cell transplant recipient, especially in the pre-engraftment period, and here the main fungus which is seen is Candida, so prophylaxis should be for Candida. If a patient has got severe mucositis, then to prevent HSV reactivation, acyclovir prophylaxis should be given till mucositis settles or till the neutropenia settles. Now in post-engraftment period, which is from 30 to 100 days, as I told you, this is the period of maximum immunosuppression and they are at risk for opportunistic pathogen. All these patients should be on CMV prevention program, which I will discuss when I discuss about CMV. Pneumocystic xerovecchi pneumonia prophylaxis is recommended in all allogenic recipient after engraftment, means once their neutrophil count improve till the patient is on immunosuppression. In autologous recipient, it is recommended only if there is a hematological malignancy, graft versus host disease, or if the patient is on immunosuppression. Tuberculosis prophylaxis is recommended if the patient is exposed to individual with active sputum smear positive tuberculosis. In this period, the fungus which is seen is mainly Aspergillus, and if the patient is at high risk for getting Aspergillus, if there is a graft versus host disease or CMV infection, these patients should be given prophylaxis for aspergillosis also. Strongyloidid prophylaxis only if the patient is remaining in the endemic area or if he has got unexplained eosinophilia and a history of visit to area where strongyloides is endemic. One very important thing is shown that chlorhexidine bathing with 2% chlorhexidine solution has been shown to reduce the risk of infection in hematopoietic cell transplant recipient. Now, what is the role of colony stimulating factor? We see so many times these patients have very low neutrophil count. It is recommended only in patients with autologous hematopoietic cell transplant who receive a suboptimal stem cell dose. In allogenic HCT recipient, it is controversial. What is the role of intravenous immunoglobulin? If it is an allogenic hematopoietic cell transplant recipient who has bacteremia or recurrent sinopulmonary infection and immunoglobulin level is less than 400 milligram per deciliter, immunoglobulin should be given to raise the serum immunoglobulin G level to more than 400 milligram per deciliter. Again, immunization is very, very important in this group of patients. Now, some guidelines about vaccination of this patient. Re-immunization for most autologous and allogenic bone marrow transplant recipient is recommended after the immune competency returns. Patient should be immunized in the first and second year post transplantation. All non-live vaccines should be given. Booster for diphtheria and tetanus should be given every 10 years. Lifelong yearly seasonal influenza vaccine is recommended. Live viruses like measles, mumps, rubella should be only given after 2 years following transplantation, that too if there is no active graft versus host disease and the patient is not on immunosuppressive therapy. This is the list of vaccines which are recommended. Again, while treating these patients, we have to remember drug-drug interaction. Many of the immunosuppressive therapy and the antimicrobial drugs, they interfere and they can increase or decrease the level which can lead to toxicity. The 3 main group which we have to be careful when we are using in this patient is macrolide group, rifampicin and antifungals, especially azole group of drugs. Now, after having overview of infection in this post-transplant patient, I am going to talk about Common infection in post-transplant setting. First of all, cytomegalovirus and solid organ transplantation. Cytomegalovirus is a virus of herpes family and shares with it the characteristic of remaining latent in body for prolonged period of time. It is the most important infectious complication in this group of patients and associated with significant morbidity and sometimes mortality also. The seroprevalence rate of CMV varies from 40 to 100%, and in the absence of prophylaxis, CMV reactivation can occur in over 75% of the patient, and CMV disease can occur in up to 30% of patients. Now, what is CMV infection? CMV infection is active multiplication of CMV virus in the blood. So, you can check CMV load and you know whether there is an infection. And CMV disease is when along with this active multiplication, you have either a viral syndrome or tissue invasive disease. You call it CMV disease that time. Replication of this virus is highly dynamic and it leads to rapid increase in viral load, which ultimately leads to CMV disease. Now, this is a very important pathogen as it has not only direct but also indirect effect on the host. By direct effect, it can involve multiple organs, mainly gastrointestinal tract, pneumonia, eyes, liver. It also has indirect effect besides this. It causes intense immunosuppression and predisposes to other opportunistic infections. Graft dysfunction and rejection also happens when the patient has got active CMV disease. It also predisposes to malignancy and it leads to decreased graft and patient survival. Now, all the patients, the recipient and the donor must undergo CMV IgG level before transplant so that you can risk stratify the infection post-transplant in post-transplant setting. If a donor is positive and recipient is negative, or if the recipient has received and lymphocyte depleting drug, the risk of CMV infection is highest, and in this group it is recommended to give prophylaxis rather than preemptive therapy. Now, coming to the diagnosis of CMV. CMV antigenemia, mainly PP65 antigen is what is done when you are thinking about when you are you have to diagnose the CMV disease or follow up the treatment. It is a rapid and a sensitive assay. It is used to diagnose, guide preemptive therapy and treatment. Again, we have to remember that this assay must be standardized as per WHO standardization. Molecular test again standardized like CMV RNA or DNA quantitative PSR has shown to be very sensitive and specific test to diagnose CMV infection. Serological assay, mainly IgG, should be done in all the donor and the recipient pre-transplant for risk stratification. Viral culture have got low sensitivity and long time of growth, and it is only done for genotypic testing when you are thinking of CMV resistance. Histopathology is usually done to assess the cause of rejection and assess for co-pathogen and not just to diagnose CMV. Now, I was talking about CMV prophylaxis and preemptive CMV therapy. What is it? Prophylaxis means a patient who is at high risk for acquiring CMV infection are given antiviral prophylaxis, and it is usually started within 10 days after transplantation. The duration is 6 months if donor is positive and recipient is negative, and it is 3 months if both are positive. Another more popular therapy is preemptive therapy because ganciclovir is a toxic drug. Here you have to do weekly CMV PCR or antigen for 12 weeks because that is the period of maximum immunosuppression when the risk of CMV is highest. And if a positive CMV threshold is reached, what is positive CMV threshold? It is a standardized site specific and assay specific viral load threshold value which is locally validated as per WHO standard. So if a positive CMV threshold is reached, you should start therapy with either valganciclovir or intravenous ganciclovir till the patient becomes negative, and then again you place them on preemptive therapy for 12 weeks. Now a word about CMV prevention in hematopoietic cell transplant. All patients at risk should be on CMV prevention program. At risk patients are those which are allogenic, recipient positive, or recipient positive, donor negative, or those with cord blood transplant receiver. This is shown to reduce the incidence of CMV by less than 5%. Prophylactic CMV therapy is recommended for chronic GVHD, CMV seropositive allogenic recipient, and in this group of patients you give acyclovir plus they are on preemptive therapy, means weekly you are monitoring either the antigen or the viral load. Prophylaxis is not advised for seropositive autologous recipient. Drug which is used in this group is IV ganciclovir or valganciclovir. Mortality due to CMV infection is 15 to 20%, and if they get CMV pneumonia, the mortality can be as high as 80 to 90%. The next infection which we are going to discuss is Pneumocystis jirovecii. It is a quintessential opportunistic infection in immunocompromised patient. The onset is usually subacute over 1 to 2 weeks, and the symptoms are mainly dyspnea and dry cough. Fever may be absent. The chest examination finding also may be normal or may show few crepes. The hallmark to suspect this infection is hypoxemia out of proportion to physical findings. The chest X-ray may be normal or it may show diffuse bilateral interstitial pulmonary infiltrate. CT is more specific, and if there is if you are thinking about it, then you must do a CT scan which can tell you further about the involvement. How do you diagnose it? Routine sputum smear and induced sputum has very low yield. It is advisable to do a early bronchoalveolar lavage. The yield is more than 70% when you do antibody staining along with the PCP staining. The yield can be further increased with the use of transbronchial biopsy, which can be up to 80 to 90% yield. PCR testing and beta 1T beta D glucan are still not validated. You know, this is the X-ray typically which is showing a ground glass opacity. The treatment is trimethoprim sulfamethoxazole, which is the first line of agent, and you have to remember that in patients with severe CMV infection, you have to use intravenous preparation and not oral preparation. The dose is 15 to 20 milligram per kg per day of trimethoprim in 3 to 4 divided doses. If a patient is not tolerating Septran or cotrimoxazole or is allergic to sulfa, the next drug which is recommended is intravenous pentamidine, which remains the second line agent in severe infection after cotrimoxazole. This is a more toxic drug and it should be avoided in pancreas and islet cell transplant. The dose is 4 milligram per kg per day IV initially over 1 to 2 hours, and then the dose should be reduced to 2 to 3 milligram per kg per day if the patient is improving. Duration is at least 14 to 21 days. What is the role of steroid? If patient has got hypoxia, if PaO2 is less than 70, it is recommended to give steroid along with antifungal therapy. Dose is 40 to 60 milligram of prednisolone given twice daily for 5 to 7 days, and then it should be tapered over 7 to 14 days. Now, pneumocystis in hematopoietic cell transplant, it is uncommon if patient is on prophylaxis. These are the risk factor for having a high rate of pneumocystis infection. So, these patients should be receiving PCP prophylaxis. The risk factors are prolonged administration of immunosuppressive therapy, chronic GVHD, therapy with purine analog or rituximab, CD4 count less than 200, or if there is a relapse of hematological malignancy. Now, tuberculosis, again this is a very important problem in our country. The frequency of tuberculosis is 20 to 74 times that of general population in this post-transplant patient. Incidence is up to 15% in developing world. The median time for presentation is usually late, after 6 months. TB-related crude mortality is 20 to 30%, and X-ray may show anything like focal infiltrate, miliary pattern, cavity, diffuse infiltrate, or pleural effusion. They are showing multiple nodular opacities, which can again happen with tuberculosis or aspergillosis. So, you need a further microbiological confirmation. So, when we are treating these patients with tuberculosis, daily tuberculosis therapy is recommended, and it should not be intermittent like 2 or 3 times a week, because there is a significant drug interaction and the levels can vary significantly. Usually 6 months of treatment is adequate. Longer duration is required for bone or joint disease or disseminated tuberculosis, central nervous system disease, if there is a cavitary pulmonary TB and sputum culture is still positive at 2 months. Always remember drug and the drug interaction, and it is preferable to avoid rifampicin. You can substitute rifabutin by it. Universal INH prophylaxis is recommended in high endemic area during the first year post-transplant. Now, this is another group of problem which happen in this post-transplant patient, that is lymphoproliferative disorder post-transplant. It is potentially one of the most devastating complication of organ transplantation. Epstein-Barr virus genome is found in majority of B-cell PTLD, which occurs early, that is during the first year of post-transplant period. Ranges from uncomplicated infectious mononucleosis to true malignancy, and the involvement can be nodal, extranodal, localized, often in the allograft, or it can be widely disseminated. There are some risk factors for PTLD in solid organ transplant recipient. It can be divided either into early PTLD, which occurs within 1 year, or late, which occurs after 7 years. Early EBV infection, type of organ transplanted, OKT3 and polyclonal anti-lymphocyte antibody administration, transplant in infant and young children, and CMV mismatch increases the risk of early PTLD. The risk factor for late PTLD is duration of immunosuppression, type of organ transplant, and is more common in adults. How do you diagnose it? EBV serology, which is only used pre-transplant to assess the risk of EBV post-transplant. Quantitative EBV viral load testing is again recommended, however, the standardization is lacking, but you can do a serial viral load and you can follow the response for your therapy. You should do an early radiology, either a whole CT or PET CT if there is a suspected EBV related lymphoproliferative disorder. Histopathology is gold standard and excision biopsy is preferred. There are some other non-specific lab parameter which can point towards EBV in appropriate clinical setting in a patient. Anemia, lymphopenia, thrombocytopenia, elevation of uric acid or LDH, and serum immunoglobulin level which are markedly elevated may give a clue to post-transplant EBV. Also, CMV status must be assessed in all these patients because they predispose to EBV related lymphoproliferative disorder. The treatment is reduction of immunosuppression. Preemptive therapy with rituximab can be given if the patient is not responding to reduction in immunosuppression. There are studies which say that infusion of donor derived EBV specific cytotoxic T lymphocyte has shown promise in prophylaxis of EBV lymphoma, but they are difficult to procure. Now, another important disorder which we see in this patient is BK polyoma virus associated nephropathy. There are some risk factors for it. It can be either donor determinant, recipient determinant, or modulating factors. If there is a HLA mismatch, high BKV specific antibody titer in the donor, or it is a female donor, there is increased risk of polyoma associated nephropathy in the recipient. Recipient risk factors are older age, male, low or absent BKV specific antibody titer. There are also some modulating factors like ureteric stent, increased immunosuppression, and retransplantation which can predispose patient to polyoma virus associated nephropathy. And it's quite a common disorder, can occur up to 1 to 15% of especially renal transplant patient. So, you must have a high threshold to think of it, especially if a patient has got unexplained renal dysfunction in post renal transplant patient. So, this is a slide which says approach to these patients. Routine screening every 3 monthly for BK virus in the urine is recommended for the first 2 years. And if there is a BK virus viruria, then you should look for level in the blood, that is BK virus viremia. If it is positive, you should do a allograft biopsy. Now, if biopsy is positive, you know that patient has got polyoma virus associated nephropathy. In this stage, you reduce immunosuppression and then you serially monitor. If the allograft biopsy is negative, you try to investigate whether there is any other diagnosis like acute rejection, drug toxicity and recurrent disease. If that is there, you treat accordingly. If that is not there, then again you reduce immunosuppression and monitor patient for BK virus viremia. And once they are negative, then you label them as resolved. Sometimes these patients have rejection and they require retransplantation. So, it can be done in them, but again you have to keep a close watch and monitor them closely for BK virus nephropathy. Now, last is what is graft versus host disease, which I told you is again a problem in this patient. It is a cell mediated reaction against recipient tissue by the transplanted donor organ. It requires an immunosuppressed recipient, a donor organ with immunologically competent cell and expression of new tissue antigen by the recipient. It can be acute or chronic. And the clinical features are, it can affect the liver, the skin or the gut. So, patient can present with cholestatic jaundice, can present with the diffuse rash or present with diarrhea. Risk factor for GVHD is more in adult and elderly population. If there is a HLA mismatch between the donor and the recipient, if the patient is CMV positive, a multiparous woman, and if the transplantation is from woman to men. And the treatment here is intensify immunosuppression. You can either give pulse steroid or other immunosuppressive agent. So, to conclude, infection in post-transplant patient is an important cause of morbidity and mortality. The immunosuppression should be balanced to avoid rejection of the organ and prevent the patient from secondary infections. All these patients should be closely monitored and you should have a high threshold to investigation like CT scan, bronchoscopy for early detection and treatment of patient.